to the October 26th Finance Committee meeting. You are being audio and video recorded. And let's see, people. And yes, so first up will be, we're going to do roll call and then public comment.
Okay. Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Moulton.
Here.
Councillor Nash. I don't see him yet.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll take, yes, so if there's anyone who in the public who would like to make a comment before we begin the meeting, you're welcome to do so. Okay, maybe not. Okay, well, we can start the meeting, and members of the public, we will have some ability to answer some questions if you want to just use the raise hand feature if you to let me know that you would like to speak. So we have
Here he is.
oh, there he is. Yep. Okay.
Right.
So we have
I think Lizzie is here. She might want to speak.
yeah, well, I think she'll raise her hand if she wants to, and also they can we can entertain some questions from the public later. So we have the minutes, the June 8th, 2022 minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Councillor Moulton.
Yes.
And Councillor Nash.
Yes.
There he is.
Okay, so welcome, Councillor Nash. And so our next agenda item is financial impact of capping retail marijuana stores. I want to thank Director Nardi, our finance director, for being here, Solicitor Seawald, and also Amy Cahalan from the Downtown Northampton Association. Thank you so much for your time tonight. So, this is the Finance Committee, and so therefore our agenda and items are directed and are beholden to the subject of finances. The public, of course, can say what they would like, but that's counselors, we really need to kind of stick to our agenda items and the scope that's on our agenda. Just wanted to say that. And yeah, so let's see. So we have a discussion with Finance Director Charlene Nardi and Amy Cahalan, and then we have Solicitor Seawald for item 5, legal questions related to cannabis legislation, our next agenda item. Of course, Solicitor Seawald can chime in, if he has something to add to any of these agenda items. So yeah, so without further ado, I guess Director Nardi, would you just give us kind of a, whatever kind of overview you can?
So sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting. As I said in my email, I don't feel like I really have the expertise to do like a full market analysis or to speak about other communities. What I can tell you is what the cannabis revenue looks like in the city of Northampton. And if I may share my screen, I'll share
we make her a co-host?
Yep.
Okay.
So let me just.
Thank you, Laura.
So can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So basically what you're looking at is the marijuana, the adult use marijuana excise since 2019. And as you can see here, is it large enough for everybody to see? Do you want me to blow it up a little bit?
If you could blow it up, that's always good. But
Oh, it's too small.
Yeah, there it goes. Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's great.
I just, that good?
Yes, thank you.
Let me do that. Oh, now it's too big. Hold on. I just,
Okay.
okay. Yes, I know. For me too, Councillor Labarge, I like it big too. Okay, so if you look at 2019, we only had the last two quarters, quarter 3 and quarter 4, and we took in $980,000. And then if I compare those same 2 quarters, because that's all I have for 2020 and 2019, those 2 quarters, the difference is 33%. So in 2020, we took in 33% in those same quarters. So I just want to say, basically, if you look at comparing those 2 quarters, then you compare 2020 to 2021 and 21 to 22, you can see our revenue is going down. Comparing 2020 to 2021, we're down 16%. You compare 21 to 22, we're down 17%. So our revenue is already dropping. And we've talked about this at the meeting, that our share of the market, based on the fact that more businesses are opening, and as more states come online, the market's adjusting itself. And we know at some point, where we're hoping, that will flatten out. Actually, when you look at 2023, I dropped, here is our budget amounts. So each year in 2020, the city budgeted 1.2 million. 2021, we budgeted 1.2 million. In 2022, we started to see the writing on the wall. So we dropped it. We dropped it about 3%, 3.5%. That wasn't enough. We did not make, as we talked about when we talked about our 2022 revenues, we didn't quite make it. We were off about $7,000 in our project. We didn't make our projections for 2022. So we dropped it for 2023, or I dropped it 15%. And at this point, it looks like we're on target. We've took in 245,000 for the first quarter of 2023, and that's about 25%. We're 25% through the year. So we'll see. I mean, honestly, our revenue is dropping as the market adjusts itself, and more people, or excuse me, not more people, but more businesses come online. I know what is it, Vermont, that's coming online this month or last month. And then, of course, I think New York, Rhode Island, and Connecticut are all in line over the next year to come online with businesses. So, the market will adjust itself. And so for me, what I'm looking at is really I'm looking for this ideal number to budget at. I budget at 975,000 for FY 2023. By the third quarter, I'll have a much better idea of what it looks like for FY 23 and what we'll be budgeting for FY 2024. In the fiscal stability plan that we talk about over 5 years, the mayor and I didn't really know. We remember we did this back in March of 2022. So yes, we dropped it by 15% for the budget for FY 2023. And then we just put in a 1% reduction each year, because I really don't know what that will look like. And of course, when we redo the fiscal stability budget again, that 5-year plan, I'll have a better number for FY 2025. But I'm still projecting, until it levels out, I'm still projecting downward revenue for this particular revenue source. So you also asked me what we earmark, or do we earmark money, the revenue for something specific? And we do not. We treat it like any other revenue source. It kind of goes into the pot. So in this respect, that's a good thing, because some of our other revenues, like ambulance, which is increasing, covers when we're not bringing in, like this past year, when we were short that $7,000. So we do not earmark it for something specific. It's just another revenue source that we look at. So, that's about, really all I can say. This is such a new market with it. Is everybody okay with me stop sharing?
Yes. Shagin, could you make sure that you send that information?
Absolutely.
For
Yep.
every one of us counselors? Thank you.
Yes, I will absolutely send it to all of you. So yeah, basically, it's such a new market, and I don't think there's there's not enough historical data out there to really say what's happening. I don't feel like COVID, at least from our numbers, really impacted it. If you look from 2019 on, we were the first in the market and we got the lion's share, but now that is adjusting itself as more people have businesses. So I don't have much more that I can share beyond that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Director. Let's see what questions our counselors may have. Let's see. Did Counselor Nash, did you have your hand up? And
I did, but
Counselor Labarge?
I see Counselor Labarge.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine letting her go before me.
Yes, Counselor.
Oh, Jim, you can. You've had a vacation over the weekend. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So Charlene, Director Nardi, some questions that we already discussed this on the phone, but that in terms of our cannabis revenues, we can't break it down to figure out how much we're getting from any particular retailer, correct?
Correct.
It's basically we're getting the lump sum from the state. It's not saying who it came from, whether it was for any particular product or and I'm guessing that delivery or growing or whatever, this is all related to just the retail sales, correct?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, yes.
So this is I think it's 12 providers that we have right now, but we don't know which portion they have.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Nash. That was my question also. But anyways, Nardine, I have to say that how can any one of us predict what that market's gonna be? You can't. There's no way. Any business, it's very difficult to predict how they're gonna do. Even before the COVID hit, it depends on how many people visit these restaurants right down the line. And I know we're a business family ourselves, and it's very difficult out there, not just with the marijuana shops, but with many types of different businesses. Charlene, you did answer quite a bit of my questions I've had. I've been talking with several residents of concerns of where the money goes. And you clarified that it goes back into the general fund, correct?
Correct.
Because you said pot, and I want to make sure that that's clarified here.
Yes.
So, or my phone would be going off the hook tonight. Anyways,
Right.
I want to thank you for explaining, Charlene, about the revenue. I think that's very, very valuable. And I think with the graphic that you had placed here on our computers is very valuable, because I want to put it on my website. And also when people call, talk with them about it, because I think that's very valuable. But as far as losing some money, yeah, we are, but we need to expect that, you know, because we're becoming saturated. I mean, right now, I mean, our big name here in Northampton is that we are Massachusetts #1 pot shops in Massachusetts. People I talk to, that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth of what we're labeled at. So anyways, I want to thank you for being here and appreciate the update that you've given us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Nardi, for your presentation. In terms of the decline in revenue, you attribute the decline to the market share, Northampton share of the market in terms of the entire state, rather than any particular local or regional effect. Is that fair to say?
That's our assumption, yes.
So there's really and you haven't detected any tie between the decline in numbers here and the number of marijuana dispensaries open in Northampton alone?
Well, no, only, and the reason for that is because I think, if I remember correctly, the city has not seen a new HSA in over a year. And so revenues are still declining. So they've been stable for at least a year, and we're still seeing a decline. And then before that, I think it was 6 months. So I don't think the decline has to do with that, because we were building. I mean, we don't have that many years to compare. We got what, three and a half years worth?
Right.
And the decline started, if you looked at that graphic, after the first 2 quarters of 2020, the revenue was declining. I mean, compared to the quarters before that. So
Yes.
no, I mean,
And-
this, based on my limited knowledge, that's my assumption.
Yes, and I understand that there's very limited data on this, but it's fair to say that the decline that started after the first 2 quarters of 2020 has not been abated by the fact that that more dispensaries have opened in Northampton in the interim. We're still seeing
Correct.
a decline. Okay.
Mm.
And I had one question about the revenue use. Would you entertain suggestion that some of the excise revenue be put toward a marijuana related expense like education?
So that's what's actually the impact is, the impact fees that we no longer could collect. So certainly if that was something the mayor wanted to entertain, we certainly could do that.
Well,
Right now,
yes, no, I understand that was the intent of the impact fees. And a couple of years ago, the former mayor decided that those would no longer be collected. And I guess my question is, has there been discussion, or would you entertain discussion about substituting a certain amount of the revenue, the excise revenue, for an expense that perhaps would have been covered by the impact fees? I mean, we found that the impact fees weren't needed for things like infrastructure, police, and so forth. But it's possible that education could be something that's identified as a need.
and I think the mayor and I are always open to discussion. My only concern with the revenue dropping, we are now already using that revenue for other, for the budget. So where would we find the revenue to fill that hole? If we're going to move it someplace else, where will we find the revenue to fix, to backfill that? So always I'm open to discussions about that, and I'm sure the mayor is as well. That would just be my concern.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to chime in. Vice Chair Labarge, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, so what I'm hearing actually is that the decline in revenue is actually not going to be mitigated by allowing more stores to open, not necessarily.
Say that again.
So we have a decline in revenue, but what I'm hearing is the allowing more pot shops to open is not going to mitigate that problem.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I just want to be, and we have two stores, two host community agreements, two businesses that are still yet to open. So we don't have that revenue yet.
Right.
Correct.
That is my understanding, that there's possibly two more licenses out there
Right.
that
Okay.
have been approved. Yes. Or are going to be approved.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's 12 open, and then there's possibly one more for a duplicate. I don't know the exact details about all those, so I don't want to misspeak.
No, that's fine, Director. And then, so, I mean, the other two kind of arms on this are the delivery services and like the possibility of consumption cafes.
Right.
I mean, do you have any kind of anticipatory idea around those, or what you expect them to do to the revenue or contribute?
So yeah, so I don't know, like if you're I don't know if the licenses for consumption would be different. Are they going to be different licenses?
Right.
I don't know enough. So of course that would impact if this is a new business and the city wants to continue to access this revenue source, then I would be worried that a cap would prohibit us from taking advantage of that revenue source, like a new revenue source. So right now, if you needed a different license to consume on site, I would want to make sure if the city wanted to move forward, that the cap wouldn't impact that.
Okay.
So, it's an emerging market. So I'm not sure how a cap would actually, and it depends what your cap would be, like whether it would be a different license and how your cap would affect it. But yeah, from sitting in the financial space and just that's my focus, I would want to make sure that we had the opportunity. We were the first to take advantage of this revenue source for retail. I would want to make sure that if the city wanted to move forward, we didn't make it difficult for us to take advantage of that emerging market.
Yeah. I see some questions. Excuse me. My only other thing, Director Nardi, I don't know if you can speak to this idea of the secondary market and the concerns around it, capping and a secondary market that would possibly contribute to inequities or raise up, kind of jack up the prices of licenses.
Right, exactly. So the mayor did talk about her concern about that secondary market, and certainly that's been happening in, I guess, Colorado, especially is it's creating the expensive commodity of having a license. And I can't articulate as well as Annie Lesko can the issues that we have around alcohol licenses. With that cap, the concern is that we would be creating the same problem and that we would be boxing out the smaller businesses.
Right.
And I think the alcohol license is a real issue. And I think it would be short-sighted. And I think the mayor thinks it will be short-sighted if we did the same thing. We would create a market where we would have just the larger businesses being able to afford them. And the whole point of this business, or the point of the state with their laws, was to make sure that this was available, to those who have been, the social equity, those who have already been disadvantaged. So that is a concern of the mayor's. I can see that we don't want to recreate the same thing that we have with the alcohol.
Well, thank you for that. The only thing I'll say is I don't know that we are doing that great on social equity in terms of our business owners. And so I think, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's some great things happening at the state level that are new, the trust fund for social equity candidates. So, I think moving forward, the equity question is going to be a big one because of that. But thank you, Director. I think Vice Chair Labarge had her hand up, and then I see Lizzie has a hand, and
Thank you.
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Chardine, I have a question. When you talk about social equity, is there social equity right now in our city of Northampton with the dispensaries? Do you know anything?
I
about
don't.
that?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Counselor.
Okay, great. I will actually, Lizzie, if you hold on, Solicitor Seawald might be wanting to respond to that. Are you? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good evening.
Madam Chair. Excuse me?
I
Good
said
evening. Good evening. So let me just say that I recall doing one social equity HCA some years ago, but other than that, there have been no social equity applicants that I'm aware of. And I'm talking about social equity applicants under the state social equity program.
Yep.
Right.
Had one, and I believe we have one who is engaged in courier business.
And a
Yes.
what business?
Courier,
Oh, okay, thank you.
the form of delivery business.
Yep,
Thank you, Solicitor. That was helpful.
thank you.
Let's see. I see Lizzie and Heather had their hands up. Lizzie, would you like to speak? Let me see if I need to unmute you. Let's see. There.
Hi.
Lizzie,
I have a lot of questions, but I will just stick to this one for right now. Do you have any idea how much it costs these business owners to open a dispensary in Northampton? I see a lot of them doing enormous renovations. I know somebody that owns a cannabis transport company. I know that his investors could not get into the business with less than $25,000 a piece. And it took millions of dollars for him to get the transport business going. And the cost of renting spaces in Northampton. These things do not allow for social equity. is there anything helping minorities and disadvantaged people with business loans? Is there an incentive by the city of Northampton that can be offered to building owners to lower rents, to incentivize renting to these minority and disadvantaged people of any kind of business, a clothing store, a coffee shop, but we don't need more of those either. I mean, there's so many things we could be doing. It seems to me the amount of money that it takes theoretically to open one of these places in a place like Northampton, it's really not accessible to most people who are socially and economically disadvantaged anyway, because there's other programs missing. And I think the city of Northampton, failed these minority groups. And I think the state of Massachusetts failed earlier on. And I think we have a lot of hindsight now that we didn't have at the beginning. And maybe we didn't know how things were going to take off. As far as I know, there are 2 minority-owned dispensaries. I don't know about the delivery businesses, but out of the 12 open dispensaries, there is one owned by an African-American, and there is one open by a couple of Jewish people, and that's it. I'm just wondering if there's any numbers of what is required to open one of these and how available that is to people. I'm also really aware a lot of these business owners will eventually sell to big companies and cash out for millions of dollars. This old friend of mine who owns the transport business, that's sort of what he's waiting for, right? Like his investors are bringing in money and he's waiting for his $3 million check, and then he's going to get out of the business. And from what he says, that's what all his colleagues are doing in the industry. So I have some other things to say.
Well, we can go, we can let Heather, and then we can kind of try to circle back. And we would definitely want to hear from Amy Cahalane too. I'm just going to respond. And I hear you, and I do think this new equity trust fund at the state level is very exciting. The social equity trust fund that will provide, that's at the state level, that's not the city level. It doesn't address what you were, that very reasonable, concern about, our local rents and all sorts of businesses. And so, yeah, I hear you on that. And I just wanted to respond about the new social equity trust fund. And, that's an interesting point about, the secondary market concern if we cap and that becoming an elitist market. But what I'm hearing is, and I'm trying to kind of conceptualize this, the primary market is becoming elitist. So I guess that's a hard thing for me to conceptualize which one would be the most elitist, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking unless if anyone else, I don't know if Solicitor Seawald or Director Nardi wanted, or anyone, or Amy wanted to answer, anything that Lizzie brought up. If not, we can go to Heather. But if you want to say anything, that's fine too. All right. Okay. Well, Heather, why don't you you can, in case you have a question, then we can circle back to our. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just interested in how we do the analysis of our financial needs in Northampton. What did we do before cannabis? And why are we sort of almost dependent on it now? And looking at it in a way that overrides other really important questions, like we may be able to balance our budget with it, and budget is really important to the health of a community, but at the same time, it does have impacts and causes cost as well. And we don't look, it's hard to identify those, and they can be insidious, and it can have to do with dropout rates in high schools and things that are hard to measure. And so it's like, I think when we look at policy, where you really need to look at include the health of our community, and whether that's what we want for our community, how we want our community to look, what businesses are being able to open, like Lizzie was saying, and not just reserve it for cannabis being the answer. But I also just wanted to say, like with the alcohol comparison, the Massachusetts Package Store Association is opposed to caps, and they represent small mom and pop shops. And they're worried about removing the cap, because then what it allows is places like Cumberland Farms and grocery stores and chains and Total Wine and More to move in and open in ways that push out those local mom and pops. And for the local mom and pops, that's their retirement. So yes, these licenses cost a lot, but it also allows these shops to be able to sell off their license and then, have that as their kind of nest egg or something. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing. And I'm not convinced that uncapping actually creates an environment for small players. I don't think it does. I think capping is actually better for that small business market. And for the potential to have a license that's valued, rather than just selling it off and changing hands and that kind of thing. The other thing is there are impacts of just an oversaturated market. So we said, like, well, how do we, do we just it's sort of like, what does market force do to businesses? And what does it do in terms of creating a highly competitive market to grab for the tiniest share of the market? And what do businesses have to do in order to succeed in that highly competitive market? And that's why we have caps for alcohol, is so that we don't have a commodity that's addictive and dangerous in many ways, being one of these things that we're competing heavily with. It's fine for clothing or for, candy shops or something, but it's, when we're talking about, a controlled substance, you don't want that highly competitive environment, in terms of the way that it impacts, sloppy business practices, basically. And I guess my last sort of thought, and I do have a couple questions. And, one of my questions is, well, I think around the cannabis cafes, and especially around the equity issues as well, I think we know that Massachusetts did not get it right with the equity piece with cannabis. They did not. And now there is this attempt to say we have a second chance with cannabis cafes. And the reason why there's going to be this fund is because in order to have smokable products in a cannabis cafe, you have to, and to have it even, that's disallowed, but there's a sense that perhaps vaping could be permitted if we have these highly expensive ventilation systems. So once again, this market is going to be prohibitively expensive, and that's where the social equity fund would come into play and maybe give that. But again, someone can, when we say we're doing this for social equity, we should be putting a fund aside that would allow people who have been most harmed by the war on drugs to decide to open any kind of business they want. Why do we pigeonhole them into opening a cannabis shop or a social cafe? It just feels so ingenuous, and that's because it is. It's kind of like a guise for now we can, this is why communities can get behind this, is that it's going to be equity. And again, someone can apply as an equity applicant and then very quickly turn around and sell it to a non-equity applicant. And we're back where we started with this white male dominated, who knows what market, so it's, and big players, and the big players who own shops across the US can weather the storms of these highly competitive markets. So I don't think we're setting ourselves up, really well for this. But my final actual question is, I'm actually really curious if, for example, we've heard a lot of outcry from Florence about not wanting a cannabis shop downtown. And now there's a new petition circulating that says no cannabis shop in Florence. And I'm wondering if there's a possibility of saying no, either having zoning restrictions in Florence that are really clear and that the community gets some input into, or if we can say, actually, no cannabis shops in Florence. Is that a possibility?
So I don't know if Solicitor Seawall would want to answer my understanding is that that would be a zoning change. In other words, a cap would be a citywide cap.
Right.
And that kind of more specific location issue would have to be a zoning change. But
It would be a,
Solicitor Seawall,
thank you. It would be a zoning change. This would be a land use issue, and it would be covered by a zoning change. I'm not really familiar enough with all the zones in Florence, and how, whether there are zones in common in Florence with other sections of the city, a common zoning designation, which would have to be uniform. So you couldn't impose in the commercial district in Florence a prohibition without that prohibition also applying in all other commercial districts, because all commercial districts are the same.
Right. I mean, I heard of another community where the village was able to do something different than the main community. Like, I don't know, why does Florence have to, and Leeds have to abide by exactly the same, do we zone for all of them and it's just a blanket statement, or can the villages actually do something different?
It's the city
Legally.
council that does zoning in villages, in the city, in all of the parts of Northampton. So, and again, all the zones have to be uniform. So the short answer is, if the council wanted to wanted zones without cannabis retailers, that could be done.
Solicitor Seawald, I have a clarifying question. Are you saying commercial, so you can't make a zoning change in commercial Florence without it impacting commercial Northampton? Or are you saying,
So
you're saying all commercial within Florence?
right. So all districts are the same. So if you have an area designated commercial 1, every area designated commercial 1 would be subject to the same regulations.
In the
So
city?
if that was in the city, everywhere
Right.
in the city would
Got
be
it.
subject to the same regulations in the same district. We could create a whole new district, the no cannabis district, and prohibit cannabis there.
Well, I don't
You can
mean
do
it,
that.
I really don't mean it sarcastically like that. I
No,
actually
no, no,
want,
I didn't
I
take it
actually
that way.
want to know legally if
Yeah.
villages have some rights around zoning and things that may be that may end up, because I've seen it happen in other communities like ours. And so I'm just wondering if you know that, or should I check some other place for a legal advice on that?
I'd be interested in knowing exactly what happened, but and I didn't take your comment as sarcastic. And if my response seemed sarcastic, I didn't mean it that way. We're all one community. We have villages, but we're all one city. We're all controlled by one city council.
But I guess we clearly have different, I mean, the outcry that happened in Florence means, like, I think that we are one city, but it seems like there's, sort of different personalities in different, areas too.
And that's why there's public comment at the city council. So if this were to come up at city council, all of Florence could come out at public comment and express their view. But there's no specific role for the village to play in zoning changes, other than those who live in the village are citizens of the city and have every right to tell the city council exactly what they feel.
Okay. I'm gonna, I see that we can continue kind of circling around for questions, but I want to make sure other folks get a chance. Heather, we can just go through a few more, and then I can circle back to you if you have some more questions. I see Wendy. Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Hi. Good
Hi.
evening.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for allowing the public to engage with you in this meeting. I really appreciate that. I just want to go back to what Heather and Alan, if it's okay, I can be formal with you. We're talking about. It seems to me the solution, or the reaction, or the action that could be taken to accomplish what Heather was talking about would be to redesignate Florence as a different kind of commercial district. The downtown one and the Florence one are one and the same. And that's where by right, we can have retail businesses, retail cannabis business. So you could either accomplish it, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, by recategorizing, redescribing the Florence one in some way that's different, with a different title. Or we can, and this is the big question, go to something where we would have, like most other communities who have zoning in Massachusetts around this, have special permits.
Right. That's so. Are we finished, Wendy?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Solicitor Seawald, perhaps you could address the special permit um, topic. I believe that you are muted.
Sorry about that. A special permit under zoning is the category that is right in the middle between something that's allowed as of right and something that's not allowed as of, at all. And that is a process by which one of the land use boards in Northampton, it's traditionally been the planning board, will hold a hearing and make a determination whether this use is appropriate based on a whole host of criteria that are set forth in the ordinance for this particular location. So it's not a yes, it's not a no, it's a maybe. And it's a process that, you know, for the 38 years I've been doing municipal law, or before I came to Northampton, the 28 years before I came to Northampton, I did hundreds of zoning appeals in court, and they almost all were around special permits. And the same thing was true in Northampton. But sometime just before I came, the planning office had made a determination that they were going to move away from special permits. So, and because they are very cumbersome and they result in a lot of neighborhood litigation that slows down development and prevents housing from being developed. And that was the concern in our planning office. And so we have moved away from special permits in the city. That doesn't mean that the zoning ordinance could be amended to require a special permit. And I have been through numerous special permit hearings for cannabis dispensaries in other communities.
Thank you, Solicitor. Okay, I see. Wendy, did you have any? I see your hand still up. Did you have? Okay. So I see Gwen, and then I want to, and of course, counselors, if you have anything to say, and then I would love to move on and engage Amy Cahalane and get her point of view. But Gwen, and then Vice Chair, did you have your hand up? No. Where'd you go, Mary Ann? I lost you. Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
My boxes shifted around. I don't know what happened. All right. Well, Gwen, why don't you go ahead first?
Okay, well, I guess I've had there's some concerns that I have, but I mean, you know, and I will mention them, but I've been driving home, so I've had you guys on Facebook and now I just came in like this. But you know, some thoughts I had, oh God, I'm gonna touch it, I'm gonna go there, is Coca-Cola is leaving. You know, they have all of the water, they have maybe a system set up where they can get rid of waste. And so I was thinking okay, you know, clearly, you know, Northampton is a spot and we like being that spot. That's great. But I almost had this I was envisioning this sort of thing at the Coca-Cola plant where it turns into a mecca, almost like a mall for cannabis, you know, where everyone is just there. They're just there. You know, maybe that is a safe place where there could be tables and cafes set up within that space in an alternative way. So you know, we're going to be losing that revenue, but then maybe we could regain it again in that way and have it just really focused in that area or that part of the city. And so that's one thought I had. And then the other thought I have is, you know, if we were not to go with a cap, you know, we do want to think about waste and how, you know, things are being handled environmentally. And so you know, just to be mindful of that, where we have made progress in terms of sustainability in the city, and we continue to do that. And so we don't want to lose sight of that or do any backpedaling. So those are just a couple of thoughts I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Gwen. And I realize I neglected, just because I personally know you all, that probably when you first speak, it would be good for you to say what city you're from.
Oh, yes.
I forget because
Okay.
I just happen to know where you all live. So
That's My name is Gwen and I am
Yeah.
a resident of Northampton proper and I live off of King Street and I live in public housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. And yeah, Vice Chair, did you have a question or comment?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say about the special permits. In East Hampton, Amherst, and Hadley do require a special permit. I think with a special permit, there is some value here where it actually gives the residents the opportunity to go in and be able to say exactly how they feel about a situation. Is it highly recommended to be in that area? Can they show the proof of it should not be there? I think a special permit is very, very important. Also, I think if you look at some of the municipalities, like East Hampton has a 350-foot buffer. That is a big buffer. So anyways, also doing some research, many municipalities have adopted Board of Health regulations per CC guidance relative to marijuana establishments. So I haven't seen anything on the city website on that. So I want to check that one out. But anyways, I'm really concerned about the special equity. I'm very concerned about a special permit, which I feel that the people here in the city of Northampton should have their rights and that opportunity to go into a planning board and say exactly how they feel about whatever, wherever it's going to be placed. And that's not happening. The only meeting that they're having is with the owners who apparently want to go ahead and open up a dispensary. I heard Lizzie talk about rent and so forth like that. I can tell you right now, and I know for a fact, Cernax Buick is a rental and has a dispensary at $20,000 a month for rent. That I do know, because the owners are good friends of ours and live up the road from me. So it's telling you there's a lot of money there. Who can afford that? Special equity? No, they cannot afford that. So there is a problem here. And I think maybe we should look at forming a committee in this city on special equity for businesses. And I agree with Lizzie, not just the dispensaries, but all kinds of businesses. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Bard. And actually, that brought up a clarifying, you brought up a good point and a clarifying question I now have for Solicitor Seawald, and then we'll get back to Lizzie. Solicitor Seawald, with the special permit, can you put in criteria? Is there a lot of latitude with the type of criteria you can put in it? Can you put in, social equity candidates or community pushback, or I don't know, can you?
There are ways to incentivize social equity applicants and things like that, much the way we incentivize affordable housing in our zoning.
Yeah.
There are ways to do incentives. I don't want to get too deep into the potentials for ordinances and that and zoning ordinances, because I'd leave that to our planning director to do that analysis. But there's the opportunity to incentivize, and there are also conditions that can be placed on any permit that's issued. Hours of operation, things like that, just things that protect the neighborhood. But I just want to caution that special permits and the special permit conditions, when you read the ordinance, they're around things like harmony with uses in the neighborhood, adequate egress and ingress, noise, lights, things that are impactful to the neighbors surrounding it, because anyone who is an abutter or an abutter to an abutter within 300 feet is presumed to have what we call standing to appeal. And that's important, because I just want to be clear that there are concerns about dispensaries, but the land use concerns that are central to the zoning ordinance, those we haven't seen very much of. we haven't seen complaints about lights and noise and, you know, all those kinds of things that you might see with a bar or, you know, so I just want to be, I want you to be cautious when you consider this, because it's not a poison tip arrow that's going to, you know, that's going to slay the dragon.
Thank you very much. That was very illuminating. Lizzie, and then I would love to hear from Amy Cahill. So Lizzie.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I guess the whole issue of finance as a sober marijuana addict is difficult, as was sort of mentioned by Heather, right? You can't equate what's good for the people with necessarily what's healthy monetarily for the city. Like it's so complicated and there's so much to look at. So I just hope everybody's sort of keeping that in mind. So I was thinking about this social equity issue, and as we heard in a previous meeting, some of the statistics that Spiffy brought to the conversation sort of talked about the oversaturation of dispensaries in our city, without question hurting our youth. And yesterday I spoke with a friend who has a son who's in 8th grade at JFK, and she took him to a concert for his birthday in Boston, and there was pot smell, as there often is at concerts. So she sort of started a discussion about what the smell was. And after the concert, her son sort of sat her down and said, you know, Mom, I know that smell because everybody's vaping pot at JFK.
Wow.
Like all of my 7th and 8th grade friends and lots of other kids. And they're vaping it and they think there's nothing wrong with it. And she said, why do you think they think it's harmless? And he said, I don't know. Like, it seems like all the adults are doing it and there's all these dispensaries. So like if it was harmful to kids, why would all the adults be allowing all these dispensaries? Was sort of what he was saying. And it's alarming to hear that 12 and 13-year-old kids are vaping pot every day at JFK. Sorry, I wrote down notes and I'm a little scattered. I apologize. I'll try to be a little more fluid. The social equity issue in Northampton, I spoke about a little bit, but with those spiffy statistics, I believe Carolyn spoke at a meeting about the fact that minorities and LGBTQ youth are using pot at a higher rate than other adolescents. And I'm wondering that's not social equity. If we are leaving these already marginalized kids open to this flood of pot that is going to inevitably derail some of their lives, and possibly throw them off course forever should they become addicts, that is not social equity. I grew up in Brooklyn at the tail end of the heroin epidemic and during the crack epidemic. And I'm not comparing substances, but it was daily exposure to what an influx of intoxicating substances into minority and marginalized communities does. And I watched every day growing up the devastation. And I think we need to really look at that.
Thank you, Lizzie. Lizzie, it's a little late in the game, but could you also just state what city you live in?
Oh, I'm sorry. I live in.
No, I didn't ask. I neglected to
Yeah.
prompt people in the beginning, and now I'm trying to make up for it in a very sloppy way. So
I live in
yes.
the Florence section of
Okay, thank you. And thank you for
Northampton.
sharing that story, that compelling story. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really I want to check in with Amy Kaling because I invited her, and I feel like I kind of surely when we talk about that's kind of what I was saying in the beginning. When we talk about the financial impact, it's definitely a limited. When we talk, how do you quantify the health of a community? How do you quantify the cost of social costs? So I'm very aware of the fact that that's a limited conversation, but I am curious to check in with Amy about I think I mentioned this to you, Amy, and you can just like how would a cap impact existing businesses, and what's your sense, and whatever you would like to say, actually, Amy.
Sure. Thank you so much for letting me come and talk tonight, and for talking long enough that I drove wildly home from Amherst and now am Zooming from the comfort of my bedroom. So since you and I spoke, Rachel, I talked to some of our downtown businesses to get a sense of the impact that the cannabis dispensaries were having on them. And interestingly, for the ones that had felt a direct impact, that impact was all pre-COVID. So when the cannabis, and this makes sense, right? When the businesses were first opening, they saw an influx of people, many of whom were local people that they knew, who now had better paying jobs and disposable income. And there were several retailers who saw notable spikes in their sales that they could attribute directly to people with better coming to shop. But COVID seems to have COVID, and I'm sure the addition of other dispensaries and the current financial circumstances our country finds itself in seems to have leveled that playing field, eliminated that bump. And I would say that no business that I reached out to or that reached out to me is feeling a direct impact from the dispensaries. They are feeling what I'd call indirect impacts. So, and indirect impacts both positively and negatively. There are certainly plenty of them who report to me that they have customers coming and complaining that Northampton is becoming all pot shops and none of the varied small businesses that we used to have. They, on the other hand, say a dispensary that fills a vacant storefront is better than a vacant storefront. So there is something to be said for that as well. And then just looking at my notes here, that a couple of our businesses were also less concerned with the number of cannabis dispensaries and more concerned with local control. Which of those dispensaries are owned by folks that are local and are really engaged in the community or willing to be engaged in the community versus ones that are coming in from out of town or out of state and maybe have a more corporate model and aren't giving back in the same way that our small businesses do in our community. That ownership piece mattered to the downtown business community. And I talked to them briefly about caps just to get a sense of what impact they thought a cap may or may not have. And it was, people were all over the place, but points that were made were some concern. A lot of people felt like the market will sort it out, that a cap isn't needed, that we're getting to the point where the market's saturated and it will shake out on its own, and why impose a cap if that's going to happen. And some worried that if we cap dispensaries, that we prevent that exciting new creative model or wonderful owner who maybe would be the next dispensary to open from getting that chance because we've placed a cap. And that if the market sorts out maybe the dispensaries that aren't as great or aren't as creative, not having a cap would leave space for that type of new business. On the other hand, there's a fear that because many of these cannabis places are coming in very well financed, that they are taking up space that could be another different creative small business that isn't cannabis, but that doesn't have that financial backing. And then separately, for maybe another conversation at a different day, I would love to talk about licensing, because I do think the current liquor license landscape is incredibly problematic. And the notion of talking about licensing cannabis in the same way just makes me incredibly nervous.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you for
Sure.
all that research. Wow. I mean, you've done a lot since we talked last Friday.
know.
That
I
seems like
talk a lot to people, so it's all
Yeah,
good.
that's really very interesting. Yes, Vice Chair Labarge, did you have a question?
Yes. Thank you, Amy, for your
Right there.
information.
You're right there.
Amy, how many businesses did you talk to that were for not capping?
I did not count. But I did not count, but I think there were only a couple that were pro capping. But I would not take that as a representation of literally anything. I certainly didn't talk to all of the businesses. I couldn't even tell you if I had a good representation of types of businesses or different blocks downtown. So I don't want to make anybody think that I did some sort of beautiful, comprehensive conversation.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yes, President Nash.
Thank you, Rachel. Or Chair, Chair.
That's okay.
Don't fall, now don't fall.
Amy, so I know that there's a concern that these cannabis retailers are crowding out possible retailers in Northampton. Have you heard of any examples where that has happened? Like, oh, there was going to be a shoe store going in, or an art dealer or something, and a cannabis shop got in the way.
I have not heard any examples of that specifically happening,
Right.
but I would make two counterpoints to that. One is, as I think Lizzie, but maybe Heather, or maybe both of you pointed out, it's expensive to rent downtown as a small business. So I think there are lots of factors that are preventing those businesses from opening, probably not just cannabis. But I will say in a couple of spaces, there were cannabis places that had options that kept those storefronts empty for quite some time without the possibility of another store going in. I think we're down to maybe only one place with an option left. But there was a period of time where it felt like there were several storefronts that remained vacant without the possibility of anybody trying to move in there because of the options on them held by cannabis companies.
So the vacancy was as a choice of the person leasing the property, rather than, because they had to lease these properties up for their applications. So while they were waiting for applications to be approved, the properties were vacant. But what you're saying is they could have considered actually, I guess, releasing the space to somebody else to use that space.
I'm saying, if I am understanding the particulars of the spaces in question, that before the application part, when they were going through like the licensing process, that would take in some cases, I think more than a year, though Attorney Seawald and others should correct me, before the application process, that those cannabis companies were able to pay rent to the landlord, and that landlord agreed to hold the space vacant, waiting for that license process to go through and then the application process to go through. And so, yes, it was a choice of the landlord, the choice made feasible because the cannabis companies were had the capacity and the capital to do that, which your average, I think, small business retailer doesn't have.
Mhm.
Not faulting the landlord for making that choice. I get it. It's a tough economy, and you need to be able to pay your mortgage too. It's just a financial difference, I think, with many of the cannabis companies versus a regular small retailer restaurant.
I think it's fair to say that they have resources that most retailers that we're used to in Northampton. They have resources that are much larger than the typical retailer in Northampton.
By and large, I would say that's true.
Okay, thanks. And Let's see. I think that's it. Amy, thanks for being here.
I know.
Thanks for
And
having me.
and thanks for your research.
Thank you.
I see Wendy has her hand up. I'm going to go to Councillor Moulton because he hasn't spoken yet, and then we'll go to Wendy. So
Thank
Councillor
you.
Moulton, yeah.
Thank you, Amy, for being here. Thanks for your thoughtful comments. And I understand that it's anecdotal largely. You haven't done a scientific research, but in your opinion, does a number of dispensaries that are open in Northampton contribute significantly to being a draw to the number of people who are coming into the community who are likely to spend money in other ways, at restaurants, for lodging perhaps? Is that, how much of a factor is dispensaries in drawing tourists to Northampton?
I have not found that to be the case for quite some time. I think that was the case when Netta first opened, for sure. Although I will say that I heard plenty of reports when Netta first opened that Netta was packed, and people parked by Netta, went into Netta, got their stuff, and got back on the highway. I have heard precious little, if any, talk about people who are coming here as a tourist for the purpose of who are coming here because cannabis is the draw and then staying here and enjoying a lovely weekend. I haven't heard any of that. I think there was the hope that that would happen, but so far as I'm aware, I don't believe it has.
Okay, so fair to say then that a cap would not have a direct impact on reducing tourism in Northampton, in your view?
I think you could make that argument, but I think you could also make the counter argument. I've always thought dispensaries could be like brew pubs. If you had one that was really creative or niche or doing cool entertainment or tastings, or I have no idea what. And if you cap and prevent that really great spot from opening, then you would be impacting tourism.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go to Wendy. Wendy? Oh, and Wendy, could you just state your city or your address?
Oh, and I live in Florence.
Oh, yes. Well, you're a guest, so we won't
Okay.
let you do that. But members of the public, I probably should ask them to state their city.
Again, thank you for letting us participate. Wendy
Yeah, my
Goffman.
pleasure.
I live in Leeds apparently, but I feel like I'm really in Florence. I'm in Fairway Village. So that was very interesting, Amy Kaolin. That I thought, that was helpful information. I want to see if I can get this out in a way that's not too convoluted. I'm not pressing for capping right now. This is not where I'm going with this. But one, it seems to me, benefit of having a cap is having to create reasons why you can say no to somebody. Okay. For instance, like other communities who have had a cap, let's say they have a cap of 5 and they get 3 applicants for the 6th. And then they can create reasons. Right now, the mayor was left in a position of, trying to figure out how to respond to the community and how to, she had no guidelines. She has no guidelines. And I don't know if people are following me, and Alan Seawald, if you wanted to say anything, but I don't know if having a cap, even a very high cap of, 15 or more, would at least allow for some kind of, either as Springfield and other communities do, have a review committee, or some kind of guidelines for rejecting beyond the vague and possibly relitigated language from the Salem, Mass case. Does that make sense to people? We don't have guidelines for who we can say no to, really. And that would give that would create an opportunity for that.
So how do you feel about a special permit, Wendy?
Well, I have been promoting that because most communities do that, and it offers the opportunity for people to know what's going on in their neighborhood. Right now, they don't know unless they happen to catch a legal ad, about a community outreach meeting. So, we've zoned simply by saying, here in the two different commercial business districts that we have, Florence and downtown. Now, the Gwen Nabad brought up that interesting idea of having the Coca-Cola plant be a hub of sorts. That's not in any district. So that would raise that question. So anyway, that's it. I don't want to go on it. This is not my meeting. So
Oh, no.
I want to respect that.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. So we'll check in with Heather and then we'll probably move on to the legal questions after that. So Heather. And Heather, could you state your city? Or your
Sure,
address?
yes. So yeah, I'm Heather and I live in Florence, 115th Street in Florence. Yeah, so I guess I'm just circling back on the idea of capping retail commercial cannabis, right? Right now we cap that. Like some communities cap that, and they're referring to the retail. They're not referring to the number of necessarily grow facilities or manufacturing or delivering. So, I think like to think that this cap has to be like all encompassing. When we set a cap, it means we're ending all of these other businesses. I don't know that that's true. I mean, so I guess that's a question. Similar, like, and I think it's an important question when we think of cannabis cafes or that novel, new, creative type of idea. And I will tell you that especially with it, products that can be addictive, the industry will find many, many, many novel, creative ways of marketing this to people. And some of them will be pleasant and some won't be. And, I think Circle K gas stations in Florida are selling, cannabis out of the gas station, and that's legal. And it's the same company that owns Rise in Amherst. So it's like, these are big industries that know how to do this in other states in different ways and can bring those novel, innovative things here. And so I am concerned about that. And I think with the social cafes, we have to move super slowly. We don't know what those look like. And that's very problematic in the ways that they potentially undermine the state smoke-free workplace laws. And we saw in Holyoke the death of a 28-year-old in a manufacturing facility. It's like workplace issues with cannabis industry have not even begun to emerge. And so to begin to erode workplace workers' rights in a cannabis cafe, feels really, I don't know, like really counterproductive to all the work that went into putting those in the first place for bar and restaurant owners and workers through the, tobacco and smoke-free regulations. So those there would have to be an exception made with those. In Northampton, ours are strong enough that we wouldn't allow smoking or vaping in a social cafe. So it would have to be edibles and drinkables. And then you have to ask, like, what's the business model? And that's what Aaron Vega asked in a meeting recently with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. It's like, where's the business model for this cannabis cafe? And how does a bud tender know when someone's intoxicated? And then, what do we do about testing for driving or just even understanding what intoxication looks like? So, when we talk about capping, I guess I'm just bringing this back, is that, we also should be thinking about really hard about whether we want these social cafes and whether that innovative new market is worth it. And if we do, is there a way to do it slowly and not be the first to capitalize on it just because the finances are there? There may be really good reasons to move more slowly.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Just looking at the time. So Cara and Gwen, if I'm gonna, I'll let you ask questions or make a comment, and then I think we should let Amy go. She's been very gracious with her time. So I'm just gonna check. Oh, Cara, could you, since you haven't spoken yet, would you say your city or your
Sure,
village or
sure, I'd
whatever
be
you'd
happy
like
to.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. I'm a resident of Florence on Spring Street, and I'm speaking not as a city employee with the Department of Health and Human Services, but as a parent and resident. And I sorry I missed the first hour of the meeting. I was with my child. So I just wanted to, my understanding of this meeting is to talk about the cost left, like business and financial costs to the community. And often when we think about cost to the community, we think about tax revenue and like how much these businesses are bringing to our community. I just want to make sure we're thinking about the real cost financially. Like it's really, nobody wants to think about children and health as a cost, but they're a big cost to our community. And so not to lose that, I think some of the media that came out after the last city council subcommittee meeting was that there was no data. And I just want to clarify, there was really clear data in the state that high rates of children are going into treatment for cannabis head over shoulders of other children. And we are seeing correlations that the closer they live to multiple dispensaries really leads to higher and heavier use. And that's really scary. And so if there's any takeaway messages that there's a real cost financially and emotionally to families and our community around lots and lots of cannabis. And I'm really concerned about on-premise usage coming along with a potential non-cap of cannabis stores. So just thinking about the balance of, again, I'll just say, why not cap? And then if there is a need to like say, oh, actually we should release the cap, you have the ability to do that very easily and say, like, we want some more creativity or we want to put some more parameters on it, but currently that doesn't exist. So in the sake of not losing sight of those costs, of the human costs and the cost to like our adolescents, we're in a super mental health crisis. The pandemic has really hit our children hard. And if you want to pretend that, sorry, that was too, I want to reel that back. If people are thinking that cannabis doesn't have an impact on kids that are suffering in mental health reasons, that really needs to be dug into more before you make a decision. So thanks for letting me speak, Rachel. And sorry if I got a little edgy there. I got a little,
Hey,
it's my kid, right? It's our kid, it's all of our kids.
Edgy women have a special place in my heart. No problem with me. Thank you, Kara. Let's see. When make a comment or a question? Yeah.
Well, I guess it's kind of a comment. You know, it just happened by incidentally last night. I was doing some research on whatever I was doing research on. And I wanted to tell somebody about how I used to go to the Western Front, which is a reggae club in Cambridge. And when the Western Front came into Cambridge, they were unable to get any kind of funding to exist. So they had to create their own way of getting loans and whatnot to make their business legitimate, because they were an African-American business, and people presumed that, people that went there would be smoking a lot of pot because it was reggae. So I just looked it up last night. I just was going to share the history of the Western Front because it was such a wonderful club, and lo and behold, it has become a dispensary. So I just thought that was such an interesting thing, that it went from a music business that created a vibrant musical environment within the city of Cambridge and around in the surrounding areas. And that now, they ended up going out of business, maybe they couldn't keep their funding going or whatever happened. And now it's like just dispensary, it's owned by a dispensary. So, where's the justice in that, historically and just in every way. So I just wanted to share that story. Thanks.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Gwen.
So, counselors, does anyone have any final questions for Amy before we release her to the wild? Looks like Amy, thank you so much. And I wanted to say that I am very actually interested in learning more about licenses and special permits. And we'll have to give a think to where in council, that we could learn more about that, because I think it would be helpful and useful, not only around cannabis, but around all business related matters.
Sure. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Thanks so much for letting me come.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Good evening.
Amy.
Okay, guys, so we did touch upon our agenda item number 5, a little bit. Let's just make sure that we have covered that before. Let's see what time it is. Yeah, we have a little time, and then because I kind of want to wrap up the cannabis talk within the next few minutes so that we have time for the for our other agenda item. So any other let's see, question, any other questions for city solicitor Yes. Counselor
Thank
Nash.
you. Thank you, Counselor Maori. City Solicitor, I have a few questions here. So just to get these ideas out in the public domain. So we currently have 12 open establishments. City Council could cap at 12 establishments right now, and we could do that, correct?
You could pass an ordinance through the normal ordinance process.
And create a cap then. And then
That's right.
my understanding is that there's 14 applications. So there's two that are they've been approved, but they haven't been acted on yet. And one of those two actually has 2 locations. So with the 2, it's actually we're talking 15 locations total that have been approved.
Approved by whom?
That these are signed host agreements.
Okay, so here's my opinion. Let me just step back and say, not only is this a new market, all of the laws around regulated cannabis in Massachusetts are relatively new. We've had one major Supreme Judicial Court case in Salem, but there's not a lot of law here. At least in the courts. This is a legal business that was voted on by the citizens of this Commonwealth and by the citizens of the city, calling for legal recreational marijuana. And it is the most regulated marijuana in the country. I mean, we are the most regulated market in the country. Places like Colorado and Washington don't have all of the hoops to jump through. And I will just correct Amy Kaelane. It's not a year, it's years. It was years. Think about how long the old Sam's Pizza was empty. Years. And that's on the state. That has nothing to do with the city. That's on the state. They weren't ready to take these applications. And because it's so heavily regulated, it's a long, arduous process and very expensive. And that's the reason that we're not getting social equity applicants, because it's too long and expensive a process. One of the things that has not been decided is whether what gets you under the cap. So let me just say that obviously a cap wouldn't apply to an existing business. So if there were 15 open and you decided 12, you'd have to wait for 3 to close, and then you'd be at the cap, and then when the 4th closes, you'd have room for another one. Okay, that's clear. The question is whether the contractual relationship with the city, the agreement of the city to allow you to operate as a part of the licensing process, because an HCA is required in order to get a license, is one of the things that has to be in the application packet. And so the question is whether someone who has a contractual agreement to operate in the city beats a cap if it didn't exist when the contract was entered into. And this is perhaps a close question, but as a matter of contract law generally, when you enter into once a contract is entered into, the rules of the game can't be changed if the other party to the contract has relied on that agreement. And what I mean by relying on the agreement is spending money, incurring liabilities, entering into contractual obligations that they wouldn't have entered into before they had the HCA with the city. So I think there's a fair possibility, or maybe even a probability, that any entity with an HCA will not be subject to a cap, but I can't say that for sure.
Thank you. I have more questions.
I have more semi-answers for you.
I know, thank you. So,
keep going.
So based on this idea that we have 15 approved HCAs, they're probably fall under what you just described as that those are going to be allowed. But let's say we set a cap at 20, just to pick a number, that that we could go and do that. And then once we hit the 20, that any others would have to start lining up in a queue or something like that. Okay.
Correct.
And then we could also set a cap at, for example, 10. And that, like you were saying, that we'd have to wait for retailers to close, and then through some sort of queue that it would be figured out who would be the next one to step up. So that gives me 3 questions out of that one. So do we know how a license expires, one of these cannabis license? It's probably a case of this is so new, it's never happened. We've seen this, this issue with liquor licenses that go unused. They can be taken away, or we've seen our licensing board take action there. Do we know if there's a way that a license could actually expire? Because I'm picturing, if I'm a retailer and let's say I'm, number 11, and we've set the cap at 10, I can sell that business along with that license.
Mhm.
I still, it's almost like a liquor license in that sense, that I could still sell that to somebody else. We've already seen some of the businesses get sold within Northampton, with all of the previous work, to become legally open already in place. So I know I'm kind of rambling here.
Yeah,
Go for it, Alan.
I'm
Yeah, you're not rambling.
I honestly, I will say, I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know that these licenses expire at all. There may be a 10-year renewal. I have no idea, but I can't imagine that they expire in short order. But I honestly, I don't know that. And if it's important to you, I will certainly look it up. But if things remain the way they are, I don't foresee a long line of people renting spaces in the hope that sometime soon a cannabis retailer is going to close and open up a slot for me. Because don't forget, you have to have the location locked down, and that's why the locations are rented and vacant for this long. You have to have the premises locked down and controlled by the operator in order to get a license. Because the CCC is going to come out and make sure that it complies with their, voluminous regulations. And so they want to make sure all the security measures are in place, all the filtration systems, all of this, everything. So you need to have the location, and it's not like you can just get in a queue and then when your time comes up, find a place. So I don't really see it happening that way.
Okay, one more question. How long does a host agreement last? Is there?
Host agreements are subject to recently amended legislation, which limited the ability of the city to collect host community fees without documenting the impact that was being paid for by the operator. Okay. And that statute also put host community agreements to 8 years.
Okay. And so all of these current retailers that are operating in Northampton are subject to an 8-year agreement.
Correct.
And so at the end of 8 years, what might happen?
Well, we're going to have to see what the law is in 8 years. Do they still need another HCA? Then we're going to have, I have no idea what's going to happen that far down the line. There may be some changes to the law. If other states are any example, it's going to be a move toward deregulation or less regulation. But at the same time, I mean, no other state has liquor license done the way Massachusetts does it. We're a very provincial state in that way. And so maybe we won't lessen the regulation. We certainly haven't pulled back on the ABCC.
So it sounds like from where we sit right now, there's still a lot of unknown legally as to how all of this is going to play out.
Right.
Hence the partial answers.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Which I always appreciate. Partial answers, as long as you're not correcting me and saying no, Counselor Nash. That's I'm always good with your answers. All right, thank you. I'm done with my questions.
Yeah. Counselor Moulton.
Thank you. I just want to point out that Gwen has put in chat that the state requires licenses to be renewed every year by the CCC, which matches my understanding. So it's a 1-year license. So I just want to go back to Councilor Nash's first point, and that is that the city could now impose a cap by ordinance, and Attorney Seawald, that would not affect any of the businesses that have entered into a host community agreement with the city.
That's right.
Correct?
That would be my opinion, but that has not been decided. What the, what the cutoff would be in that situation. That would be my opinion.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. And so the cap would not be retroactively applied, but it could come under the current number of 15 that have been approved and the 12 that are open. Correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Councilor Labarge, did you have a question?
No, I was waiting for you.
All right. My question was, with a kind of a capping ordinance, and is concerned about secondary markets and licenses, can the city put any kind of stipulation about? So, example, could we say we're capping at a certain number, like 15, and then we would be favoring social equity candidates,
right,
for a certain amount of slots, or I'm hearing more and more kind of increasing complexity about actually trying to kind of, to actually kind of get social equity candidates set up to be here. But I was just curious if we could either cap but leave some slots or exemptions, or kind of say that when businesses go out of business, then the next applicant we would be favoring or trying to incentivize social equity candidates or something like that. And I guess the same with the secondary market idea. I mean, as a city, we have no jurisdiction to, we have no way to control the cost of these, of the licenses being sold, or to kind of mitigate the problem on the secondary market. So 2 questions, I guess.
Yeah. So again, let me just say that I don't know the answers to these questions for sure, but this is an extensively regulated market, as I said, and there's a small carve out in the statute and regulations for cities and towns to regulate. The first thing that the statute says about local control is that any safeguards we impose cannot be unreasonably impracticable. Don't ask me exactly what that means, but it cannot be unreasonably impracticable and cannot conflict with this chapter, the 94G, or with the regulations adopted pursuant to the chapter. So we have a small carve out here about land use and about numbers, but we have nothing to do with licenses at all. So with regard to the sale of licenses on the secondary market or anything like that, we don't issue these licenses, and we have no role in the licensure, except we enter an HCA, and then we file a certification with the CCC that the use is allowed in the district. The zoning has been met. that's the only role we have in that process that I'm aware of. And so, we have to be careful about thinking about licenses and on, so, I, could we limit, impose a cap and exclude social equity applicants from the cap? Statute says nothing about it. I don't think it is unreasonably impracticable. It doesn't sound like it conflicts with anything in the statute. I think we can do it. I can't tell you that for sure it will be upheld, but if we don't take bold steps, if we're going to cap, if that's going to happen, then I'm not in any way promoting or taking any position on caps. I'm agnostic. I'm your lawyer. And so I would say these are the types of things that you'll never know the answer if you don't try. And things like that won't happen, would never happen if nobody tries. But I don't know the answer to the question, but that's the best I can tell you.
Thank you, solicitor. I mean, I just, sitting here thinking about that, and of course, this is providing you have social equity candidates that even apply. And if they don't, and there's an open slot, you just let it sit there. And I have a lot of I can see why it's so peeling an onion there. Thank you, solicitor. Councilor Labarge, did you have,
Yes.
and I see Heather, and then that may, I'll let Councilor Labarge go, and then Heather, and then I'm going to try to wrap it up so we have time for our other
Right.
agenda item.
And
Okay.
I'm hearing about our city of Northampton. We do have a regulation right now, Attorney Seawald, correct? Which is a buffer. We do have a buffer at 200. I think it's 200 feet. Is that right, Councilor Nash?
That's what I see. Wendy Foxman posted it's 200 feet in the chat.
Right, because I know East Stanton, theirs is 300 feet, but I know we have one, just like with New Dancing also.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that if we did the 350 feet, it would affect several of the retailers in the downtown area.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna thank you, Counselor. I'm gonna Heather. Did you have something to say?
Oops, I just clicked off some notes. It's hard because I'm like, I feel like
I
I
know.
had something to say a while back, but I also don't want to just talk for no reason here. But I guess I'm just thinking, back, just wanting to confirm that we could cap the retailers and that address the social cafes as a different issue. So it's not necessarily like capping the retail means we're capping the social equity cafe. And also, though, that we should really think carefully about those social cafes. And I guess I was just thinking also about what Mr. Seawald said about, that we're moving towards deregulation and less regulation if we follow the path of other states. And I agree. I think that the cannabis industry has an incredibly strong lobby. And again, we're like this small public health voice that comes to these meetings and says, be careful what we agree to, because once we pass it, we have it, and the industry will continue to loosen the regulation. And we did vote for this, and we voted for a highly regulated, industry. That was why we wanted it, because we wanted it to be regulated. And I don't, see that, but once we get this in, there is that risk that it will continue to get kind of sloppier and sloppier. And, so again, like, we have a chance now to sort of get it right and then see what happens, and not just go after the fast, easy first money and then see that there's a, kind of crap show down the road with the variety of ways that the industry seeks to get around the regulations.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that. And also, I just really want to thank all the members of public who spoke with us tonight. I'm just always impressed with our community and and the amount of knowledge and kind of critical analysis. It's really engaging, and I love subcommittees because we get to do this a little bit more. And I really enjoy it. I think it really adds a lot to our understanding. I'm looking at Heather. I think did you have us follow up? Your hands up? No, okay. So I think, counselors, any last, you know, questions before, we wrap up, this agenda item on the legal questions related to cannabis legislation? If, yes, Counselor Moulton.
Not a question. I just want to echo, Rachel, what you just said, and really apply it to all three committees of the council, the city services and the community resources committee, as well as the finance committee, and really commend the chairs of those three committees, Councilors Perry, Foster, and Maori, for pulling together these discussions, which have been very instructive. We've heard from a lot of voices, and I think it really shows how deliberate we have been as a city council in responding to a concern in the community about the dispensaries. And really, it's been I think it's been very it's just been a real eye-opening conversation over these past 2 months.
Thank you for that, Counselor. Okay, so thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to our other agenda items. You're welcome to stay, of course, but thank you. But we're just going to kind of try to have a conversation with counselors since it's getting late. Okay, thank you, counselors. Wow, I think do think we did a great job. You know, I think without anything in front of us, I think council as a whole has really done what we could do in terms of this discussion. So we have 6 financial orders, 7 new business, and we put the discussion of the role of finance committee would like to play in the upcoming 2024 budget season. Boy, we've been really wanting to talk about this, and I'm just so glad we finally got to it, even to just touch base and see where we may want to go with this. It happened so fast. Yes, Council LaBarge.
Yes, could we take a break here?
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. I concur. So let's see. It is. Go check and make sure that they're not setting the house on fire.
7:44.
Okay, it's 7:44. Do you how long do you want, Counselor? You want to? So how about like 7?
That's fine.
7:40. I'm trying to do math. 7:48.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So finally, yes, discussion of the role of finance, the finance committee would like to play in the budget. And I don't know, Councilor Moulton, you know, this was one of the first things you mentioned when we started, when you got on council and we were having our first few finance meetings. So I'd love to like touch base with you about that a little bit more, your vision.
Okay, well, it's timely, I think, because I think I raised that question in January when I've been on the council for a matter of days, and now after nearly 10 months of how of getting an inside look at how the sausage is made, I think that the role which would be advisory to the mayor does need to come at the beginning of the budget process, because we have a very limited ability to to have an impact on the budget once it's presented to us. So I think that this is the right time to be thinking about what would be appropriate for the finance committee. And I think it would have to be in the form of some kind of an advisory sense of the council. We don't have, there's no order that we could give to the mayor, but and I think, I think like to hear from colleagues, but it could be around issues like something that was raised tonight. I'm feeling on the marijuana issue that there is a need for some education in the community, particularly around the impact of marijuana use on youth, and that I'd like to suggest that that the some of the revenue, the excise revenue, be put toward that purpose. Another possibility that has arisen recently. There was discussion last week before the Energy and Sustainability Committee about a new position. Not sure what it would be called, but something like a climate crisis coordinator that would be across departments. And that would be something, I think, for the council to, if there was support on the council, to issue a recommendation to the mayor that be included in the next year's budget. So those are just a couple of examples of things that I'm aware of now that we could send to the mayor with the backing of the council, and then it's advisory, but it's there are perhaps other models that could be used as well.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes, I like that idea, but I also feel with finance committee, this is a powerful committee, very powerful. And I think, Stan, you understand that, because we are fully responsible of having that mayor come in anytime and question of anything financially. And I think when we're talking about another position, a department head position, we could bring her right into finance. We can ask her to come. We can ask the mayor to come to anything in finance to educate the public, like you're saying, Councilor Moulton. So that's where I'm at with that. And I also think if it's something really big, very vocal, like we're hearing from so many residents throughout the city, we have the subcommittees also, city service, we have community resource, right down the line. There could be an advisory committee also, special for something like that. So that's my feelings toward it. I mean, right now we're looking at almost coming to 8 o'clock tonight and we're talking about something here. But I think our mayor is an excellent mayor. And I know if we ask her, when we know that we need to have her in there to educate our public, is very, very valuable in finance committee with anything dealing with money and so forth like that. And as long as I've been a councilor, and I'll keep saying it, no matter who our mayor was, David Narkowitz was excellent, would come whenever we would talk about it, with David Murphy right down the line, she was there. So that's my option right now, is having the mayor coming in to finance committee when we want to bring something out that we feel that the public should know about the process right down the line.
Thank you, Counselor.
You're welcome.
Counselor Nash.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is a really good discussion, and I know we should have had this sooner, and lots of things got in the way, and it was no lack of effort on the by the chair to try to make this happen. I know many times Rachel wanted to, and things just kept bumping it.
Exactly.
So, but here we are. In my view,
Recording stopped.
Oh,
What?
Recording in progress.
there we go.
Go ahead.
They missed my whole question. That, of all of the committees, and I agree with Councilor Labarge here, that we have a special duty to really tend to the city's finances, and that we have the latitude to ask forward thinking questions about the direction of our finances. Tonight's discussion around cannabis and the projections of where it's going, that's precisely the sort of things that we're supposed to be doing. And Director Nardi was careful with her responses, which I always appreciate, because she's conservative, she's thoughtful, and she's not going to over speculate on where things are going.
Right.
And what we're seeing around cannabis in particular is that those revenues are trending downward. And anything related to the way the city is generating revenues or spending, if we have any questions, I think it's that it's our duty to be asking those questions. I can also say that as we saw earlier with Director Nardi, the mayor's office and the finance director are ready to answer those questions anytime. That the way we sent questions early on to Director Nardi and into the mayor's office, so that that they're coming prepared. I think that's the way to do it. That we have a collaborative relationship with our mayor and the administrators. But I think around trends in spending, we have a lot of latitude there. Where we start to get we don't have the same latitude is around setting priorities around the budget. That's where the mayor has that prerogative. But I do think that having a collaborative relationship with the mayor to talk about what Councilor Moulton is discussing is okay, we have these revenues. Is there a way that possibly some funding could go to a particular, support a different particular program? We can make those suggestions based on we heard public comment tonight, pretty much supporting that concept.
Mhm.
So there's this interesting, we have the responsibility of knowing what's going on, yet at the same time, it's the mayor who has that responsibility of really setting the priorities for the spending. We can push the mayor a bit, but in the end, I think as we know through the budget process that in my view the mayor has a strong position, and that's why the mayor was elected, and to make those tough decisions. But so this is all to say, I know I'm expecting quarterly reports from Director Nardi at our next council meeting. She'll do a presentation, and I I think it would be great if we wanted to do a deeper dive into all of those numbers at a future finance meeting to really tease those out, especially around that the mayor, from the budget discussions we had back in June, that we know we're expecting some shortfalls this year. So as we're talking about maybe moving some money around, that those revenues may not be there. And this is also coming at the time where we're talking about all of this ARPA money, which, people are saying, well, and I don't blame people for thinking we have a ton of money because we had all of this ARPA money come in, which is not, it's not a consistent revenue. It's one-time revenue. And so anyway, for us to work with the mayor and really delve into that, I think that's someplace we should certainly go. But this last piece around priorities, and where the mayor gets to set priorities, but I think it would be interesting for us to figure out a way to have some sort of discussion around that in terms of what she's thinking in terms of making those priorities for the budget. So maybe, having her speak them aloud prior to going into the, Mayor Narkowitz, had his way of that he would go into planning the budget and then the budget would come out. And and I don't think he ever surprised us with any of his priorities, but for us to be able to say, here's what the community's priorities are. This is something Councilor Bidwell talked about years ago. Yes. It's like, what are the priorities we're looking to see in the budget? And that it's a listening session maybe we can do that's helpful to the mayor. And that I think what we'll end up hearing is that, there's a lot more needs and wants in our community than we can afford, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be listening. And I'll say one last thing, which is to sum that up. My understanding is with the roughly $5 million in ARPA money that was available, the total number that's being asked for it's over 100 applications, is for $20 million. That residents see they have a lot of great ideas and they see a lot of things that can happen. And we should entertain those ideas. But it's our job and the mayor's job to make the tough decisions to figure out how it's going to get spent, because clearly what we want is not what we can have. So I'm not going to quote the Rolling Stones there, but
Oh, well, that's disappointing, but okay.
You can't always get what you want.
There you go. Now, if you play it on your guitar, I'll be really excited. Yes, Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. And Councilor Nash, thank you very much for talking about the mayor and the direction we should go into. I feel our mayor is open to listening to us very closely, and working us with the figures of which way to go with the money. And I think with our finance director showing the graphic chart that she had tonight was very important. And that's why I was asking her if she would send it to us counselors, because I think I'm going to put it up on our website. I have 2 websites, and I want the people to see exactly from 2021, 22, and what the little down percentages that have occurred here. And so I just want to say, I have due respect for our mayor. I feel she's a listener, and I think that, and she wants our residents to be able to hear how we feel in finance committee, especially in her ideas of forwarding, like Councilor Nash has just mentioned, about how we're hearing the community out there. Again, asking to be able to have a director in a position. which I've gotten many calls on that too, on how I felt about it. And so I think it's the right way to go. She's our mayor. We need to work with our mayor in finance. We need to ask the heavy questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Labarge. Yes, Councilor Moulton.
So I'll confirm what Councilor Nash said. Both Councilor Foster and I are part of that review committee for the ARPA community projects. And we did get our instructions earlier this week. There are just about close to 100 applications to review. And the total ask is $20 million. So it's very competitive, and there's a lot of work for us to do over the next 7 weeks. We hope to have our recommendations for the grants to be funded to the mayor by mid-December.
That's great.
So I'm hearing something that I like a lot, and that's the idea of having some kind of a listening session that the finance committee would sponsor with the community to hear from the community about priorities for the next year's budget, and then perhaps to have a conversation following that with the mayor, and have the mayor aware of what we've heard from the community and what we see as priorities that we would suggest to her. So I think that's certainly a one attractive way to proceed.
I'll step in. Yeah, that was my first kind of thought, was, or question was, what form would this take, and how would it, how would it look? We're going to always have kind of a short amount of time before the budget, so we want to get something done. We want to concentrate on a few priorities to share with the mayor. But that does sound good. I mean, one reason this idea, when Councilor Moulton brought it up, appealed to me was, I think it actually benefits the mayor, because while, say, Mayor Narkowitz didn't surprise us with his priorities, I think sometimes we surprised him with our priorities. So meaning, I think it benefits the mayor to know what's on the mind of councilors before we get to the formal, budget presentation.
Oh, I agree.
And we might, it might mean that, it might not make an impact on what the mayor does, but I think it allows for, a little bit more of a productive budget season when we have those conversations a little earlier. So I think that's why Councilor Moulton had a great idea, and I think being more proactive always appeals to me. It's really a fight in municipal governance, because there's something kind of reactive about our role, especially. We don't, as you say, we don't make the budget, we don't set priorities in a formal way. But so I guess, so my bigger question is, what could this look like, and what can we get done this year? And I guess, Councilor Nash, I suppose we can have like a listening. It wouldn't be a public hearing, or it would be a listening session. And then, but I would like to be able to maybe have a handful of priorities that we do share with the mayor. My concern is, if we have too many, it's going to be too much for her to take on. Like, so the fewer that we have to kind of share with her, possibly the more impact they'd have. So I'm just kind of struggling with how to not make it too sinewy, and actually get something concrete. And I guess my only other concern, I'll say, is really managing expectations with the community. I don't want to, pull them here to give us comment. Often, I don't know if you all find this, that people are not really clear on what councilors can do and not do. I was at a meeting where they thought we made the budgets and we could allocate funds, and so I just think we'd have to manage expectations so people don't feel like we're kind of wasting their time or whatever. That they know that we're really just going to kind of spill it, and then have then invite the mayor to our meeting and share what we heard. Maybe the way Councilor Moulton kind of made a list of themes, sometimes with questions, we could do with priorities, and then share. So I guess our next step is to think about, what can we get done this year? What would this process look like? And make sure it's kosher too. I guess we can have listening sessions, right, Councilor Nash? I don't think there's problem with that, but
What?
have you done that before? You and Councilor Labarge have been on council for a while, so.
This is not something that's been done before.
Okay.
That, and my one thought in this is that the chair of finance and the council president is happy to join you in this, speaking with the mayor about, just to say, here's what we're thinking, is there a collaboration we can do here? Is there something that, how can we make it helpful for both council and the mayor's office? And so, like we're saying, for people to be heard.
So I'm hearing the next step might be checking in with the mayor about this, and maybe this, I would love to see if we can kind of do something this year, especially since we've already identified a couple of priorities.
Yep.
And we can maybe even, it's a short time, it's late in the season, but I think we have time to do something simple and share a few priorities and invite the mayor to a finance meeting. But why don't we start with checking in with the mayor about format and what that would look like? Does that make sense to everyone?
Oh, that makes sense.
Is that how you, Councilor Moulton? Okay, she might have some ideas, or she might have more precise timing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great to present it as a collaborative effort to be helpful both to the public, but to the mayor as she prepares her budget as well.
Right. It could be, we could have a formal recommendation, or we could just, kind of have meetings in which we share a list that we have or something like that. But we can think about that. So we'll check in with the mayor, and then probably the next finance meeting, I probably will put a follow-up agenda item with more specifics about format and also what we can do this year. And we'll just something, even a little, practice run of any kind this year, I think would be great. We can try kind of scale it down if we need to, but I think it would be great. I really am just itching to try something out this year. So we'll figure out what we can do. So that's what we'll do for the next finance meeting. And in between that, before that finance meeting, President Nash and I will check in with the mayor. Sound good, councilors?
No.
No. Oh,
No,
sorry, Councilor Barge? Yeah.
I didn't catch that, but we have 4 weeks in November. You got 4 weeks in December also.
Yeah.
So we should have a good line of projects for the mayor. There's no reasons why we can't.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I think this is great.
Yeah.
And thank you for staying a little bit later tonight. I really feel like, we had the public here, and it was, it was a really good thing to kind of let folks weigh in now, especially this being the last meeting without any kind of legislation in front of us that we are planning to talk about this. So thank you for that. Any other comments on this agenda item?
Nope.
Okay.
I just want to say that I think Councilor Nash has done very, very well with tonight, talking about the mayor and working with the mayor. That's where it's all about. So thank you, Councilor Nash.
Well, then I will thank Councilor Moulton for, really having a vision. I've really enjoyed your vision around, the subcommittee, Councilor Moulton, really from the get-go. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
And thank you to
yes,
Councilor
yes.
Labarge.
Okay. Nice. I love it. Okay. Well, I think we've wrapped up that, and I would entertain another motion if we're all thanked out.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Laura, roll call, please.
Oh my God.
And also thank you to Laura.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Always thank you to Laura.
This was a thoroughly enjoyable meeting. Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
and Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Right. All right. Good evening, counselors.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good
have a
Thank
great
you.
night, everybody.
Rachel, you better get out there and start cutting wood.
Oh boy.
Rachel, we'll talk tomorrow about contacting the mayor.
Great. Thank you.